think she has texted him to see about connecting.
So we're waiting for Supervisor Chukri.
Deb, have you been able to contact Supervisor Chukri?
I contacted Paige, and she is aware that we are.
Supervisor Gallardo is here ahead of Supervisor Chukri.
Thank you. Note that record, please.
Duly noted. Scott, I'm going to mute your microphone or your camera also until it. No, we will keep the phone there. Microphone is still not quite there yet.
Good morning, Steve. Okay, I think we're ready to start the meeting.
Deb, can you start it? I don't have that.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and welcome to our Board of Supervisors meeting this morning. Before we get started, I want to let everyone know that Chairman Hickman had an out-of-town engagement, so I will humbly try to fill his shoes for this morning's meeting. Today's invocation and pledge will be led by Francisca Montoya at the invitation of District 5 Supervisor Steve Gallardo. Steve, would you please introduce our guest?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, I'll go ahead and introduce Francisca Montoya, longtime friend. And at the conclusion of our invocation and pledge, I'd just like to make a few brief comments about my dear friend. So, are you on the phone, Francisca?
Thank you, Supervisor Gallardo. May we bow our heads. Heavenly Father, as we come before you this morning, let us give thanks for this beautiful day and for the many and abundant blessings bestowed upon us. Thank you, dear Lord, for the opportunity to gather once again. This morning, we ask that you please guide the leadership of the Board of Supervisors. Allow them to lead with humility, with courage, and with strength as they go about the business of discussing and making important decisions that are in the best interest of our community. As public servants, Heavenly Father, please allow them to receive your wisdom, to listen, to seek understanding, to discern, and the ability to work together. May each member act and lead in accord with the will of his faith. And with your blessing and your grace, dear Lord, may our leaders have a fruitful and productive meeting. And lastly, Heavenly Father, may we always pray and give thanks to our leaders for their steadfast belief and willingness to be of service for the common good of our community. And this, in Jesus' precious name, we pray. Amen.
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 And now, for the Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, real briefly, Francisca, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Mr. Chairman, members, Francisca is a longtime friend, and when I called to invite her to come do this, we try to think back when we first, got acquaintance, when did I first meet Francisca? And we're talking 30 years now. It was back on when I worked in elections. She was the chief of staff for then Councilman Salomon Leja back in very long time ago. But Francisca has just been a true trooper in the community. She serves as my appointee on the Planning and Zoning. She also serves on Fowler Elementary School. I worked with her I remember working with her a lot when she was with Stardust, which was an organization to help low-income families get into housing. This was back in the late 90s, perhaps. But Francisca has just been a treasure. She has decided to even step into the ring and run for Phoenix City Council, so good luck on that. We know how difficult that sometimes is, but she is just a trooper and a blessing to have in District 5. You can always count on her as a volunteer. Anytime our office would have some type of public gathering or public event, she was always one of the first to volunteer. We haven't done much. I think the last time I saw her was at the Levine Barbecue back in March before COVID hit. But she's just an awesome person to know, and I just really value her friendship. And Francisca, thank you so much for serving on our planning and zoning and everything you do in regards to the community. And I just wish you the best of luck in the future. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Fran, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Gates.
Here.
Supervisor Gallardo.
Here.
Supervisor Chukri.
Here.
I understand that the chairman is out of town, and Chairman Sellers.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will do the pet showcase by Maricopa County Animal Care and Control. So did you know that Maricopa County Animal Care and Control has a foster dog and cat program where we currently have 73 animals fostered with 41 families? Oakley, the dog in the picture here, is a great example of this program. Adventure always seems to be calling Oakley's name, and it's time for a forever home to help him answer. This handsome 6-year-old is always ready to jump in the car and go for a ride, loves playing in water and being hosed off, and enjoys going out for walks and runs when the weather is nice. He has been very well behaved in his foster home, uses the doggy door, and is house trained. He hasn't chewed anything he shouldn't, and is very gentle accepting snacks. He has quite the reputation as a professional level snuggler and is willing to cuddle for as long as you want to. Oakley seems to be selective about which dogs he likes, so please arrange for your dogs to meet him before adopting so you can make sure they're compatible. He enjoys chasing wild bunnies, so he would do best in a home with no small animals and wouldn't mind being your only pet and keeping all the snuggles to himself. Oakley is neutered, microchipped, and has current vaccinations. His detailed medical notes can be found at apps.mcdot.maricopa.gov/adoptable-pets. So after the pet showcase, Clerk, are there any announcements or corrections to the agenda?
I have none this morning, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So we have two items on our agenda today that will have presentations, and we're going to take these items out of order. The first item is regarding elections. The presentation will be led by our Elections Director, Scott Jarrett, and Ray Valenzuela.
Mr. Chairman, I believe they are online. Scott, would you like to start?
Scott?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. And as I found out being in elections, we always have to be ready to have redundant processes in place. And this morning when I was attempting to connect to the go-to meeting for this board presentation, my computer wasn't working, but fortunately I was able to come over and join Mr. Valenzuela in his office to be able to provide this presentation. So we are both going to tag team this presentation from this office. So always good to be flexible as we move forward with these upcoming elections. So but I really appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, as we present the upcoming or the Election Day and Emergency voting plan for your consideration and approval for the upcoming November general election. And as Mr. Valenzuela presents some of the highlights from the early voting plan and what voters need to know from the early voting plan that the recorder approved earlier this week. So we thank you for your time, and we'll go ahead and discuss some of our plans and considerations. So one thing that we do is when we're planning for any election is we reflect on the knowledge, the experiences, the insights from our staff. But we don't always just keep that to our internal processes. We often reflect on and take knowledge gained and experience that other jurisdictions across the county. If we can go back to the prior slide, please. We reflect on experiences from other jurisdictions across the county. And one thing that's been resonating with me over the last several weeks as I've seen other election directors speak, conduct interviews with the media, read articles, is that there's several jurisdictions across this nation that have not conducted an election in the era or during the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, that is not the case in Maricopa County. So we have had 4 elections since the COVID-19 pandemic started. And as challenging as that COVID-19 has been for us as we've gone forward and conducted these elections, it's provided us a lot of lessons learned and a lot of opportunities for us to refine our processes so we can prepare for the upcoming November general election. And both Mr. Valenzuela and I are confident to say that we are prepared for this upcoming November general election, and the election department is prepared to be able to serve Maricopa County voters. But just because we're confident to be able to serve Maricopa County voters in this upcoming November general election doesn't mean there aren't challenges that we have to overcome and that this is going to be easy. We are still facing many of the same challenges and headwinds that we've been facing since March and through the summer into the August primary elections. And those challenges are being able to find sufficient voting locations, being able to recruit poll workers and keep poll workers safe as they're working within our voting locations, being able to keep voters safe as they choose how to participate in this election. But because we've had those experiences and we've been able to refine those processes, we're confident that we will be able to provide voters with a safe, reliable, and secure election and a historically accessible election as well. And we'll, as we go through the slides, we'll be discussing and describing how we're able to provide those voters with those options. But there's other items that we consider as we move forward with this election. And that is really being able to collaborate with the community itself. Sometimes we forget in Maricopa County, we have over 4 million people living here in Maricopa County, over 2.5 million registered voters, or nearly 2.5 million registered voters. So as that's the second largest voting jurisdiction in the country, we're also larger than 7 states. So sometimes we forget that we really are still, though, one community coming together. We'll be able to highlight and talk about some of the areas that our community and some of our partners throughout the community have done to help us in being able to prepare for this upcoming election. And then lastly, we'll talk about our communication strategies and how we're informing voters on how they can participate and successfully participate in this election. So if we can go to the next slide. So anytime that we start preparing for election and we start developing our plans, we first need to identify, well, how many voters potentially will be participating in this election, and especially as it comes to election day. Now, the purpose of our forecasts and trying to attempt to determine what turnout would look like is really based for our planning considerations. It's not to be exactly precise to say to the exact number of how many voters will participate. It's for us to identify how many resources we need to be able to support this election. So there's several different items that we consider. And some of those are early voting trends and in-person voting trends. And over the last several cycles leading up into this November general election, voters have been selecting to vote early, much more frequently. So out of the last few election cycles, that range has been anywhere from 85 to 95% of voters that have actually cast a ballot have done that either early through the mail or early voting at one of the early voting locations. So that is a major development that does impact how we need to prepare for this election, whether that is staffing our central boards, make sure that we have enough staff to be able to process those early ballots, be able to tabulate those early ballots in our central count tabulation center, but then also to be able to staff our polling locations and our vote centers. But that's setting the baseline, the overarching framework for maybe how many people are going to participate in this election. But we also need to identify where in-person voting locations should be located. And we use a variety of different data inputs to drive those decisions. And those include point density in-person heat maps, identifying where, based on historical patterns, those in-person voters do tend to vote, where those in-person voters live. So those drive a lot of our decision makings. And I've shown those types of maps in presentations in the past to the board. And a lot of those do show where a lot of people live. So they'd be in that central Phoenix corridor and that central Mesa corridor. But just making sure that we have voting locations in there is not sufficient. We need to make sure that we're also serving our rural communities, our Native American communities, and making sure that voting locations are dispersed across the county to serve all voters. So we do a variety of data analysis to make sure that we have a voting location in the right location, as well as that we have enough check-in stations to be able to serve the potential turnout for that location. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So given that analysis, we've gone through and attempted to identify what participation would look like in this election so we could have sufficient resources. And elections are infrequent, and a lot of the factors that drive what turnout what the actual turnout would be are based off election-specific items, interest, what is on the ballot. So it is hard to project, and there's not a lot of data elements or data points that you can truly get a refined turnout forecast. So we do a variety of things to overcome that. First is we used 3 different forecast models to try to get a range of what potential voters and what turnout would look like. And those forecasts relied on data points such as prior elections, similar elections. So in this case, 2008, 2012, 2016, in-person voting and early voting patterns. We also then apply factors such as voter registration increases, as well as permanent early voter sign-up increases, those types of things to identify what that forecast range should be. But we also use other factors such as comparing August to November turnout. Because those first 3 models really rely on historical data, they haven't included anything that would relate to COVID-19 and how COVID-19 may impact this election. So taking a different analysis and comparing that August to November increases does allow us to do that. And so what we're finding with all of our different turnout models is that the range of voters is going to be somewhere between in-person voters, 200,000 and 300,000 voters on election day. And that would be approximately 2 million total voters. So with that would leave anywhere from 1.7 million to 1.8 million voters voting early in this election. Now that doesn't consider any of the strategies that we'll discuss as we move through this presentation that may provide voters opportunities to vote early, whether that be by mail or in person. But there is one other analysis that we do, and we do look at the percent of non-PEVL voters that are registered and they're not on the PEVL. Right now, that's projecting to be right around 550,000 of those as we get closer to election day and the registration deadline. And historically, if you look at the 2008, the 2012, and the 2016 elections, anywhere from 38 to 46% of those will vote in person on election day. So if you take that analysis of about 45%, conservative estimate, and you also look at 550,000 voters that aren't registered on the PEVL, that would give you, again, another data point that shows right around 247,000 to 250,000 voters would be likely to turn out in this election on election day.
Mr. Chair.
So with that, go ahead.
Supervisor Gates.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Scott, just a question about this. So I'm in particular interested because of the dynamics we have in this election with some people having concerns about early ballots getting through the mail, that we may have an increase in people who bring their early ballot to the polling place on election day. So when you have those numbers there, where do the people who they're voting an early ballot, but they're participating on election day by dropping it off at the polling place, where do those people fit? Which side of the ledger?
So Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, and we'll talk a little bit more about our different strategies to best serve those voters that may be concerned with the post office. But right now we're forecasting anywhere that there could be between 300 and 400,000 potential of those voters that turn their early ballot very late in the process. And that could be either that weekend before during emergency voting or on election day itself. Now, it's important to know that those voters do not have to stand in line if they do show up at a voting location, and they can just skip the line, take it to a drop box, a secure ballot drop box in the voting location. However, we would encourage those voters to take advantage of all the early voting locations that we will be providing in this election as an opportunity to drop off their ballot at those, plus many of the standalone drop box locations or precursor to something we'll be discussing shortly, but we'll be introducing drive-through contactless drop boxes as well that will be open in the early voting period as well as on election day. So those are all strategies we're deploying to offer voters options to be able to turn in their early ballot back to us and not necessarily have to go to a in-person vote center on election day.
So, Mr. Chair, so the 200 to 300,000 election day voters includes the people who are going to show up on election day and drop off their early ballot?
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, no, it does not include.
Okay.
Those would be potential just voters only. The ones that would drop it off would be in addition to that.
And what are you estimating that number to be at this point, given the unique nature of this election?
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, right now our forecast is calling for the number of potential, what we call those early lates, but they are early ballots that have arrived on time, just very late in the process, be somewhere between 300 and 400,000. Wow. And we're not projecting that just to be for election day, but over those last few days of the election cycle leading up to election day, in addition to those that come in the mail at that point in time. And somewhere around that number, 300, 400,000.
Sorry about that, Mr. Jarrett. And are you going to be talking about that more later in the presentation? Or should I ask my question about that now?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, yes, we'll be talking more about the strategies to serve those voters and also how that could impact reporting of results and tabulation as well.
Okay, all right, then I'll save those questions for later. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, any further questions before I turn it over to Mr. Valenzuela to discuss some voter registration and information related to the early voting plan before he turns it back to me to discuss in-person voting options and election day?
I see no further questions.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I appreciate you putting up with our technology challenge. And again, I concur with Mr. Jarrett that this was our first test for this election of our flexibility. But I do want to take just some point of privilege to thank the board. Again, I've been in this department for decades, and I can feel it. But this is probably the most cooperation, the most effectiveness we've had in as far as a relationship to make sure we're serving the voters. So with that said, I'm going to move on to the next slide, please, and speak to voter registration. As you can see on this slide, we are seeing some historic registration totals. We've climbed. This slide actually is, registration is fluid. Everybody knows that. But this slide even is outdated, and it was just done a day or so ago. So we're actually at 2,459,000, or I'm sorry, we're actually at 242,476,754, although this one shows where we're at just a couple of days ago. But when we presented on August 31st, we have seen an increase of 17,000 voters just from a couple of days ago. In addition to, you'll see here, the chart shows from a year back since August, or actually since a couple of years, August 2018, all the way to now, you'll see the increase is quite substantial, almost 313,000 or 15% increase seen from 2016 till now. The big thing that as far as voter registration or PEVL or PEVL, as you will, we are seeing a large growth. As we indicate here, we have 1.92 million of our 2.47 million. Actually, we're only 300 voters away from actually reaching 1.93 million. So it's literally growing leaps and bounds. We're seeing approximately 1,500 to 2,000 a day, people joining up. So that's a good thing, meaning our messaging is working. Our messaging that telling people to use the ballot by mail, not so much vote by mail, that you have to return it by mail, but get the ballot preemptively and then choose your options, which we'll cover as we go further down. But I just wanted to mention the increase in registration and the increase in the permanent early voting list. Next slide. So early voting, again, is one of the options on top of the safe and secure in-person voting, whether it's early or on election day. But I wanted to kind of address some of the side folklore that talks to early voting, the question about our post office. I had mentioned in previous meetings that we did check with the post office. Nothing has changed in our sort facility in Arizona or the Phoenix, Maine. So we do have the same throughput that we would and have been experienced for years. So that's a good thing. Whether that was planned to be or not, it is, nothing has been touched in that facility. So that means status quo. Voters that have experienced a pretty rapid return rate, we should still experience that despite the other issues with certain other states. But what we want to know and what put out there for voters is when we speak to safe, secure, and transparent elections, the key part of that transparent part is having the voters have that ability to track their ballot. So I just want to reemphasize to the group and to advocacy groups and those listening that we really encourage people to help us with that transparency part and check your ballot. This will help you if you're concerned that your ballot has been, you did use the post office as an example. How do we know we got it? So if that text, join 628-683 for the public to know, that will get them their status on top of when we mail it all the way to us counting it, and you'll get that text message or email. The other thing to point out is the request date and the mail back date. So we'll have a calendar that we will be putting that out, but the last day to request a ballot is Friday, October 23rd. And the post office is recommending, which we're also pushing, that the voter return their ballot no later than 7 days. I do want to dispel a little bit of, Maricopa County uses business reply first class mail. There's no need to put a stamp on your ballot. It is already the fastest it can come as far as first class mail. But we do still ask that you mail that back within 7 days prior, and that date falls on October 27th. So request by October 23rd, mail back by October 27th. Last day to request is 23rd. Then, of course, Co-Director Jared will talk a little bit about drop boxes when we talk about all of the locations in a little bit more detail. But we are excited, and not to steal some of his thunder, but some of that drive-through drop-off contact list is going to be one of the things that is going to allow voters to not even have to get in that line, which they, again, do not have to wait in line if they're just dropping off. But that's one of what we want the voters to know, and we'll cover those sites, or Co-Director Jared will. Excitingly, there's a lot of new partners, and that will be covered. The other key things is that what we've done to increase access is we did recently send an additional mailer to non-People voters. We had 600,000 plus voters. We've dropped that down to 550 people that are not on People, that either way we got this mailer that informs them how to sign up or how to go vote in person in addition to that. We also have made our website, which we've been promoting quite a bit, that allows for a voter to go to request.maricopa.vote or solicitud.maricopa.voto. And in English and Spanish, either way, they can make a one-time request. If they're saying, I don't want to join People, but in the light of COVID, I would like to have the option of ballot by mail, go to request.maricopa.vote, one-time request, or new to the process just this year is online permanent early voting list sign up. It has a digital capacity to actually verify your registration and allow you to sign up to the permanent early voting list. And I think that's where we're seeing voters take advantage of what I'm going to call ballot by mail rather than vote by mail, because there is options that allow you to return that without having to use the mail system, i.e. the drop off, or going in person and voting anytime during that 27-day period if you prefer that option. Last but not least on the early voting is we are doing robocall outreach, just minimal, not invasive, but a one-time message that says closer to the time when it's time to return, voters, remember this is the day that we want you to mail it back, and if you have not, drop it off. So that's another method for us to increase access.
Hey, Ray, this is Jack.
Yeah.
Quick question. How did you determine who to send the mailers to on the permanent early voter who are not permanent early voters? And the reason I'm asking that question is I've had a couple of people talk to me and say that they've heard from people who were not registered voters who got that mailing.
Chairman, member of the board, It went to only valid registered voters that are on the system. So it was not just it was literally taking the registration rolls, and everybody that is not on People currently was sent that mailer. So it is now, again, so it was not just a random mailing to households. It was specific to voters on the registration rolls.
Okay, well, that's certainly what I thought, but I just wanted to confirm that with you. Thank you.
And Chairman and members of the board, I do want to point out that since you brought this up, there is mailers out there, the vote committee, and there's several different BCI third-party organizations that have sent out registration forms to households. I got one myself that says somebody in this household may not be registered, and it's not correct. So I know it's an effort to try to get people to register, but we're getting a lot of calls that people saying, you sent me this, does this mean I'm not registered? I just want to point out that if it is not from Maricopa County or Maricopa County Elections Department, it is a third party, and it has to be identified, and you'll see that. And likely it's just, again, they did a global household mailing. So a lot of mailings that go out there are not necessarily from us. So I just want to point that out. But if it is, say, official election mail, and it has our return address, Maricopa County Elections, it is from us, and it is using vetted registration data.
Thank you.
So next slide. So this here, and again, this is one of the things that we talked about: secure, safe, transparent. The transparent part is having the voter participate and check their ballot, track their ballot, and give them that peace of mind that we did get it. That's one of the key things, especially if they use a mail, or even if they drop it off, just with the minute we get it received, picked up from the post office ourselves or from the drop box, it's scanned in to say it's received. And if you're on that ballot status, you can automatically, or sign up to that, you can automatically get that text message or email that says we got it. We're the Amazon of voting, if you will. Everybody's familiar with that kind of notification. We want to be able to give you that transparency. But the other part is the security part. These are the 4 or 5 points of why it's secure. And it almost segues back from your question, Chairman, that we only use verified registered voter data. So only a registered voter can get a ballot. You have to have been vetted. You had to have been submit your registration. We run that up through the various different agencies. It comes back to say you are a citizen. It comes back to say the address is valid. We do an NCOA, National Change of Address, to verify the address of the voter, all before the ballot is sent and ahead of. That's when you register. But on top of that, we even do one more ahead of a ballot being sent. 90 days out, we sent a mailer that says, expect your ballot on this day, October 7th, as an example. And that is also sent to test address. It's return service requested. It requires the post office to say that John Doe is not at that address any longer. And we hold them out from giving them a live ballot and instead send them a voter registration letter to say, post office says you moved from Glendale to Tempe. So we want voters to know to expect that. If they've moved, come check your status. Go to beballotready.vote. And we're going to emphasize that throughout this presentation because that's a personalized dashboard for a voter. It gives you specifically your information, your address that we have on file, your mailing address. That's another important thing is if you have an old P.O. box, know your ballot's going to go there. You'll see that, oh, shoot, I have that. Also gives you your party, gives you your people status, all of that on that personalized dashboard, beballotready.vote. But again, back to this. Number one, you can't get a ballot unless you're vetted, registered voter. We do the 90-day notice. Number two. Number three is we track your ballot. We actually, again, incorporate the best practices of real-world environment. We actually track your ballot all the way to your mailbox. And again, now you can track it on the way back using that texting join 628-683. Last but not least is number 4, 100% signature verification. Folks out there that are saying that ballot by mail is not safe, it's actually one of the safest. Your proof of identity is your signature. Just to give you an analogy, if I gave you my ballot right now, gave you my name, you would not be able to know my signature. It wouldn't be known to you. We have a vetted ballot signature on file when you registered. We did all of the credentialing, so we know what your signature, official signature looks like, and 100% of all early ballots are signature verified. Goes through a 3-tier system where it's not just one person can establish good or bad. It actually has multiple tiers where 2 individuals that have been trained, signature verification training by affiliated forensic laboratories, that certify us to say we know what to look for. So again, and the other thing is, since I have the opportunity, the public is listening, we know that there's a concern. Well, I know my signature has changed. Let me just put that to rest. If we have not called, if you've been voting early, even if Jazz of recently, just the primary all the way back, and we have not called you to question your signature, that means we have your signature on file. We have multiple repositories of signature. When you registered when you're 18, all the way up to your 40, 50 now, we have all of those signatures. If you ever checked in at a polling place, we have that signature roster signature, the e-poll book signature, or if you voted early, we have all those affidavit signatures. So if we haven't called you, you do not have to have concern. And just to give one quick stat, 2018 general, 1.2 million ballots returned. We were only 307 that we could not validate. That's in the canvas, but that's a good number and a decimal that's really far out to say out of 1.2 million, only 307 that did not call us back, and we will reach out to the voter. Also, last but not least, only those verified ballots are counted. So when it comes through, that's the process to make this not only safe and secure, but add to, and indeed, like I said, the transparency. Next slide.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question if I might.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Chukri.
Ray, good morning. You look handsome in that tie. Thank you for wearing one. I'm
I
not.
wore my cufflinks for you.
Now, there we go. Hey, Ray, going back to two remarks, one by Mr. Gates and Mr. Jarrett about what we anticipate being an increase of day of drop-offs, right? Or even leading up to Election Day, just a day or two before, not being overwhelmed, but receiving a high number of ballots being dropped off. You touch on something that's very important for the public to know, and that is that those have to be verified. Those signatures have to be verified, and that's a early ballot processing system. If we were to reach that number, that supposed number or potential number of 300,000 or whatever it might be, how long do you think, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but when you talk about verification, then tabulation, how long are we looking at doing something? That's question one. And then question two would be, if someone came and said on Election Day and they had the early ballot and they wanted to vote that ballot, we would have to take that in from them, I would assume, and then give them a new ballot, correct? Is that how that would work? Those are just two different but distinct important questions, if you would, please.
Chairman, Supervisor Chukri, I'll work backwards for your question too, because that's the most important, that there is, again, some information out there that we want to clarify specifically for Maricopa County. We have our site books, or also known as e-poll books, are actually in-house built. And because of that, we actually have the ability to make a real-time connection to our voter registration database. Everything resides in our voter registration database, including that I sent you an early ballot. So the fact is that you do not need to surrender your ballot. And truth be told is I could have given you 3 ballots. You could have called and said the dog ate it. Here's your second. And then I spilled coffee on it. Here's your third. Now that sounds terrible, but behind the scenes, we know for me to issue your second ballot, I need to void out your first. For me to issue that third ballot because the dog ate the second, I need to void out your first and second. So no matter what, we can't, if you wanted and gave me your third ballot, that doesn't mean you don't have your first and second. Using that as to scare people, that the beauty is that because we're real time, I know that you have 3 ballots and I know you have or have not returned any of them. So when you walk in, I don't necessarily need you to surrender because of the technology. I can actually real time look when you check in, it says you have received an early ballot behind the scene, but have not returned it. So we do what I'll call a real time provisional. It gives you the ability right then and there to check in and void out that third ballot using that example. Or if you only had one, the first ballot, and give you a regular ballot, a real-time provisional, meaning you don't have to surrender, nor do you have to go through the provisional process in its entirety, meaning envelope comes to us, we check to see if you returned your ballot. Guess what? We did that instantly when you were standing there. So they do not need to resend.
So Ray, you can't. So you couldn't print a ballot out without voiding the other, right? Is there a fail-safe in the system?
Chairman Supervisor Chukri, thank you for being the technical expert to voice that in lay terms. That's exactly right.
Okay.
I can't even give you a ballot until the system says, 1, does this individual have an early ballot that has been returned? And the answer is yes. It forces them to a provisional, says, Now, they may say, I don't remember returning that. Whatever the case may be, you have the right to vote a provisional, but it will not count if, obviously, if we have that ballot back. But if it's not, then it will void real time right then and there before we can even print it out.
Great.
The first part of your question was the number, the volume. What are we going to do, and in what panic are we going to have? First and foremost is we, in 2016, 2018, we've had this kind of volume, not this high anticipated, but upwards of 200 to 250,000. We are able to process those through signature verification the following day, meaning we put all hands on deck. We have 80 experts, if you will. The beauty of the process is we're doing it off of a digital image of the packet. When we get those election night, all the way up to 2 or 3 a.m., we're sending them, we're scanning them in to capture a picture of that envelope. We put the physical envelope in a vault, fireproof vault, and we are able to disseminate those packages to all of our staff that are all signature verified trained, even our downtown office, our Mesa office, to get us all hands on deck. They've all been trained, and we go through that 3-tier process, and we are able to complete that signature verification. On 250,000, we were done in 2018 by noon. So with 500,000, apologies, but we'll be done by 5 p.m. Even if we don't, not to just throw folks at it, we want qualified votes. But so we'll have it done by Wednesday. The hangup that happened in 2018 was our old system was only able to tabulate 50,000 a day. So even when we hit them with 250,000 and said, here you go, it took them, if you do the math, 5 days to run those through because of the 8-bit technology. So again, thank you to the board for looking at how do we be best in class? And one of those things with getting a new system, the tabulation system now can run upwards of 100 to 150,000 in a regular shift. If we run into that 400,000, then we may run a second shift on Thursday. So we're confident that, and not to overreach, and since you said you wouldn't hold me to it, but we are absolutely confident that we can have these processed by the cure period, at least 95+% resolved. And there is, and when I mention cure period, a lot of folks don't know that there's a recent change this year that allows individuals that have questionable signatures up to 5 business days to come and validate. And when I say questionable, there may be only those 307 voters that we realized in 2018, but we still can't finalize until Tuesday, November 10th, no matter what. It's also the deadline for individuals who did not provide proper identity at the polls, that they too must come in and have that 5 business. So we're hoping that by that particular date that we will we're optimistic because of the speed of the tabulation and knowing that we can do the signature verification, which is not the holdup, especially if we can put all hands on deck.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ray. And Ray, if you and Scott need help moving boxes or heavy equipment, Mr. Gallardo would be happy to do so.
Well, he did have it where I mentioned long ago, or I heard Supervisor Gallardo mention that he's putting on his election hat. And I will tell him that election hat looked nice on him, so we may want him to put it back on. If
he's willing to do whatever it takes. Thank you.
Mr.
And we'll
Chairman,
move on, and then we're segueing into the in-person voting. But again, there is, on this particular screen, we talk about the early ballot secured drop boxes. Co-Director Jarrett already mentioned about our contactless drop boxes. We have some really exciting options and venues that we're going to be mentioning in that. But the drive-through drop boxes, if we can get that messaging out now, if the public is listening, advocacy groups that are out there, to say we want to emphasize that if you have an early ballot, you have an option. If you don't trust the mail, I hope you do, because we haven't had any changes to that process. But if you don't, or you prefer to, then you look at these drive-through drop boxes that will be posted on our website, that you can then not even have to put yourself in line, for individuals that are truly doing in-person voting, and help us reduce that for COVID purposes, reduce that and increase that distancing when needed. So in-person early emergency election day, I'm going to go ahead, obviously turn it over to Director Jarrett and let him go through that, and then I'll be here to stand behind him to answer any questions in our shared technology. But any questions on that, Chairman or members of the board? Any additional?
I'm seeing no further questions. Thank you, Ray.
With that, I'll switch over to Co-Director Jarrett.
Thank you, Mr. Valenzuela. So before I begin, I did want to provide a few points of clarifications, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chukri, to some of your questions as well. And I'll start with voters voting in person that have an early ballot. There is one additional security, well, there's many different additional security protocols in place, but there's one other that I'd like to highlight, and that is we've programmed our precinct-based tabulators to only accept ballots that are produced or printed in our ballot on demand. If a voter did receive that early ballot, there is no way for them to even be able to bring it in and insert it into our precinct-based tabulators. It would reject it because of our programming. So that's one additional layer of security to prevent those early ballot recipients from being able to, if they requested 1, 2, or 3, as Mr. Valenzuela described, to prevent them from being able to be counted and tabulated in the precinct. And then the only other way for them to get it back to us would be to mail those ballots back to us. And as Mr. Valenzuela described, those envelopes, those ballots would have been canceled. So there's no way for them to be tabulated and to double vote in this system.
So Scott, so you're saying there's a mechanism or a switch, without divulging our security system, that once in that situation you just described, that would need to take place before it could even be tabulated?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Chukri, that's correct.
Okay.
There's absolutely no way for them to get that early ballot into one of our tabulators and have it be counted.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll discuss this a little bit more when we talk about tabulation, but the processing of those ballots that come, those early ballots that come back through the process, Mr. Valenzuela did describe how efficient and quick we are in the signature verification piece of this, but there are a couple more steps through that process. And one of those is our EV processing board. So those are those bipartisan boards made up of Democrats, Republicans, Independents, separating the ballot from the envelope. And we do have a limiting factor there of usually right around 90 to 115,000 per day we can process. However, if for some reason the total number that came in through the late process or came in later exceeded our expectations, we do have the ability to expand the number of hours, right? Expand shifts. So we can be able to respond if there is an increase or more than what we are currently projecting. But right now, given our projections of 300 to 400,000, we would be able to get through 90 to 115 through those EV processing boards per day, and maybe quicker if needed to. So now circling back to the rest of the in-person voting options. And one thing that we've learned through the 4 elections that we've performed in COVID-19, and especially in the March presidential preference election and the August primary election, is we need to be flexible to be able to provide a reliable in-person voting option. And that is why we have gone forward with proposing to the board a vote center model. One that if late in the game there was a voting location that did need to close for whatever reason that is, we would not be having to then take those voters that were assigned to that single individual location and having to transfer them to just one other location. In this model, every single vote center that we will be providing during the early voting period, during the emergency voting period, and on election day is available for a voter to use. They have that many options. But one thing that we will be different for this election is we will be opening a significant number of our locations 2 days. So one of the ways that we can expand from the 99 locations that we used in the August primary and get closer to the 165 to 175 for the November general election is to open up about 50 to 60 of those locations to be a 2-day voting location. And that helps us in a couple different ways. Not only does it still expand that emergency voting period if those voters did have an emergency that would prevent them from voting on election day, but it also allows us to have a soft start on the day before the election. Those will be opening at 10 a.m. on the day before the election. That allows our poll workers to get familiar with the ballot on demand technology and make sure that they're viable and operational the day before the election. And then on election day, when we open up at 6 a.m., every single one of our voting centers are ready to go and serve in-person voters. And there won't be any chance of those locations not being operational due to technology issues. So if we can go to the next slide. So this slide really highlights the way that we are expanding access in this election. And most of that is through this robust early voting period. But it's not only through that early voting period, it's the number of options that voters will have in each phase of the voting period. And that's what this chart is showing here. So on election day in 2016, voters had one in-person voting option. It was their assigned precinct. In this election, they're going to have anywhere from 165 to 175 locations. Now, these final numbers are a little bit fluid. We're presenting to the board, and the board will be considering the vote centers that will be used on election day through a board resolution on a later agenda item. And on that list, there's 166 locations. Since we submitted that resolution and that listing on Monday, we've been able to add 4 more. So we're up to, well, actually we added 5 more and we lost 1 of them. So went up to 171, we're back down to 170. So we'll be refining those, as well as some of the dates of when these locations will open within the next week. And then we want to put a pin in this, finalize it so we can get our logistics, our training, all the poll workers hired, and get that really nailed down towards the middle of next week. But it's not just election day that we're expanding voting on. For the emergency voting cycle, so that starts at 5 p.m. on the Friday before the election. In 2016, there were 3 options. They were all the elections department, the recorder's office, and the elections department office out in Mesa. Now we're expanding that to be 90, or approximately 90, opening on the Saturday before the election. But then, as I mentioned, on the Monday, we're going to be opening 60 to 50 more. So we're going to have approximately 150 locations open on that Monday right before the election. And this also helps as providing an additional opportunity for those early ballot recipients to be able to return their ballot to us early, get it in the process early, so we can start that signature verification process that much earlier on. We can start the EV processing, separating the envelope from the ballot from the envelope. All of those processes, the earlier we can get started, the more of those results that we can include in our election night reporting at 8 p.m. on that Tuesday. But it's not just emergency voting. We're opening, if you compare back to 2016, we had 14 locations open for 1 week before the election. We're going to have 90 locations open. We're just over 90 right now for that entire 1 week period before the election. And then for 2 weeks, we had 8 locations open for 2 weeks. We're going to have just under 50 locations open for the November general election. A huge increase. And how we've done that is we've had to contact partners, work with most of the malls in the valley are providing a location for this upcoming election. We've had to rent retail facilities. Some of the challenges that those retail facilities have been going through the last several years and not being providing that brick and mortar in-person voting option or our in-person shopping option, creating an opportunity for us to be able to use COVID-19 CARES relief funds to be able to lease those, to turn those into in-person voting options. And then sports arenas and stadiums. We nearly at every single Cactus League spring training facility in the valley, we will be able to provide a drive-through drop-off, a contactless drop-box location. So that's what we're referring to. So right now we have between 12 and 13. We're still finalizing those. We have site visits scheduled over the next couple of weeks to make sure that they will work, but we have verbal agreements with all of our professional sports teams in the valley, as well as the Cactus League. So a really great partnering opportunity here to serve voters and to provide those voters an option to return those early ballots to us. But we also...
Mr. Chairman, sorry, Scott, I don't mean to interrupt you midway, but given the fact that we're talking about the drop boxes, can you just cover the security covered or that we have surrounding that and that process? I'm not sure if Mr. Gates touched on that earlier. Forgive me if he did, but what are the provisions that we will be implementing to protect the security of that?
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Chukri, so we have three different types of drop boxes. The first type is they're located in a government facility, and we will have 20 to 24 of those located in city halls, town halls, and some of our Maricopa County library districts. So those are under constant supervision by the staff that are working within each of those complexes, those government facilities throughout the day. And then they're secured in the evening. Well, we send out, we have a courier program that is comprised of 2-member teams. And those 2-member teams are members of different parties. And they drive out and they pick up those ballots as well as all those early ballots from our early voting locations on a daily basis. And they retrieve those ballots. They open up that secured drop box that is locked. They transfer that into a transport bin. They use tamper-evident seals that have serial numbers on them. They seal those transfer cases or those transfer bins. They have a transfer slip that they take along with them. And if it is at a early voting location, the inspector at that location signs the slip, as well as the 2 couriers that are working. If it's at a town hall, then it's the 2 couriers sign, as well as the representative of the town clerk. And what they're verifying is these are the seal numbers that went on to that transfer bin. And then they're signing off on that. And then when those bins come back to us after those couriers complete the route, we then inspect that bin, compare it to that transfer slip to make sure those seal numbers are still, first off, the seals haven't been tampered with, and that the seal numbers match. So then that's why we're confident that those ballots are the exact number of ballots that came in at any one of those drop box locations. At that point in time, they are in our possession. We do a count of those ballots, and then we prepare them, and then they are either stored here in our vault, or then we transfer them to our vendor who does the processing, and they're stored in their vault. And so that's the path of security for the drive-through, or for the drop boxes that are any of the government facilities. The drive-through drop boxes will follow a very similar approach. They will not be unstaffed. We will have not poll workers, but workers that will go through, and we'll provide them training on how to man these drop boxes. And then those drop boxes, and there'll be of different parties working those drop boxes. And it'll be a very simple process. The voters will come up, they'll hand them their ballot, and then our workers will then drop that into a locked, secure early ballot drop box. And then at the end of the shift, all of those ballots will be 2 members, different parties will transport those ballots back to us at the end of that shift. And then we'll go through a very similar process of counting those ballots, preparing those, either storing them in our vault or transferring them to our vendor to store in their secure vault.
So Scott, is the idea here that for those individuals who are on the Pebble, that they don't feel comfortable with mailing it in the U.S. postal system, that this is an alternative for them that's added convenience, if you will?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Chukri, that's absolutely right. But it's not only that. I mean, it's definitely an added convenience. They don't have to get out of their car. They can return it to us. But it's also an opportunity for them not to have to visit a voting location on election day, right? And potentially stand in line, or potentially take away a parking space for those other voters that may be there to cast their ballot in person. So it's just one of the other strategies that we're doing to not only increase access, make it easier for voters to get that early ballot back to us, but also to better serve election day and those voters that want to cast a ballot in person.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Supervisor Chukri for asking about that. It's a very important issue out there with our residents. They want to hear about that security. Mr. Jarrett, are those, you said that at the drive-by drop boxes. Those are taken downtown at the end of every shift. Is that the case with, well, first of all, are there drop boxes everywhere then, including emergency day? Or are there some days of voting that we don't have drop boxes available?
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, so every early voting location does serve as a drop box location as well. And those are supervised by poll workers during that early voting process. And on a daily basis, we go out and collect and retrieve those ballots and bring those back to us. The drop boxes that are in government buildings, some of those are opening up on October 12th, and they'll be open up right through Election Day. Many of those are not open on the weekends. They're just Monday through Friday, and they follow the hours that the city clerks establish for those facilities. And then some of those, the vast majority of those are open on Election Day as well, and they'd be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Now, the drive-through drop boxes, we're looking to open those on October 24th, so that's a Saturday, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then they would then close down and then not open up again until the following Saturday, October 31st, following similar hours, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on October 31st. Then on Sunday, November 1st, it'd be 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Monday, November 2nd, it'd be 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. as well. And then on Election Day, they'd be open for the entirety of Election Day, starting at 6 a.m. till 7 p.m. And then any vehicle that is in line at that point in time would be able to drop off their early ballot right up until potentially slightly after 7 p.m. But the vehicle would have to be in line at that point in time to be able to do that.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Jarrett, if the, so how many drop-off boxes are there going to be at each one of these locations? Because I know in the past, I can recall earlier elections where I've seen those things kind of, almost overflowing. So what are our plans on that front?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, we're going to start the day with 2 of those at each location. Each one of those we can put over 1,000 ballots in each one of those secure early ballot drop boxes. But we will have the ability to redeploy extras if they are needed. They'll have the workers that are staffing those will have access to be able to call our command center on our hotline to let us know that they are filling up, and then we have warehouse teams, drivers that could then send out additional drop boxes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Scott.
So other ways that we are increasing access to vote in person is we're making sure that every one of our locations, or not everyone, but the good portion of them are along light rail, bus routes, and freeways. I talked about making sure that we have sufficient voting locations in high density in person. Our areas that have had a historical high amount of high density in person voting, but also the Native American and rural communities. And then right now at this point, if you are within what I call the urban area, those outer loops, the 202 loop, the 101 loop, the 303 loop, the vast majority of those areas have a voting location dispersed every 2 to 3 miles. So they do provide a robust number of options for voters to participate in on Election Day. We can go to the next slide. Other ways that, and these are coming even from some of our lessons learned and how we inform voters of how to participate in this election. And one of the things that we are doing, we first implemented and rolled it out in the August primary election, was to have a very robust website that provided a lot of searchable functionality for voters to find out where their closest voting location was, which voting location based on city or town. If they entered in an address, maybe where they work, it would then return the closest location to where they work. But it also, we added wait times. We want to be able to give the voters information that they need to choose to successfully participate in this election. One of those will be wait times. In the August primary, we had our poll workers reporting these every 15 minutes, and we'll implement a similar strategy for the November general election. So every 15 minutes, voters can go to this website, find out what a wait time is at any one of our open locations, and then choose which location works best for them. But we do advise voters to make a plan for this upcoming November general election. We will be posting these in the searchable functionality probably by early October, but the list will be available on our location, on our locations.maricopa.vote later today. But given it's COVID-19, we know that it's fluid. Some of these locations could change. If they go and they look at these locations later this week or even in early October, we do advise that voters go back before they actually make their trip and verify that they have the right information before they leave their house. However, if a voter does not have access to a website, they can call the STAR call center. And that number is 602-506-1511. And the STAR call center does have representatives that has all of this information at their fingertips as well. So they can advise voters, they can search based on the voter's address, based on the voter's work address, all of those types of things, and let voters know what their closest location is or most convenient based on any multiple factors that we allow for them to search, including the wait times.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Bill.
Yeah, Mr. Jarrett, just a question on that. So let's say we've got, we're starting to see those lines popping up, and I see fields here. I'm wondering if, through our social media channels, we could be sending out tweets, running into lines. Hey, head over to, Veterans Memorial Coliseum, no wait right now, or, 5-minute wait or something like that. And then the other thing that's effective around the valley are these digital billboards. And I don't think it's too late at this point. I mean, have we thought about maybe reaching out to them again? You could have those as the unexpected happens on election day, where we could, flash up on a digital billboard, hey, these locations, no wait right now. I mean, I think you see that on these urgent care centers. I think I've seen that before on digital billboards. Is that a possibility?
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, so we will be deploying several different strategies. But yes, one of those is our communications team. Anytime lines are starting to form and get over 25, 30, 35 minutes, we will be informing the public of that through the social media accounts, and then what are their options. We are also going to be, we form teams that then we can deploy some of those teams. They will be equipped with some whiteboards, just in case those voters that don't go to the website or don't have access, that they know there is a voting location and they do show up at that location. And it's not quite as technology savvy as what you're describing, but it will work. And if there is a location that does have a wait time that's starting to exceed 30 to 45 minutes, we'll send out that team. They can man the end of that line, and then they can post on that whiteboard outside with a stand, what are the closest locations and what are the wait times at those, in case that voter didn't feel confident going up and asking our staff members. So that's really the strategy, to inform those voters, to get that wait time down below 30 minutes, and then inform them through our social media accounts as well. And then there's one other strategy that they'll be implementing is to make sure that they move that. We have a sign that informs voters if they are dropping off an early ballot that they can skip the line. So to make sure that they're moving that sign to be at the end of the line, so voters also can see that, they can inform themselves visually based on those signs, and then make the decision themselves without having to come ask one of our poll workers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Go to
Scott.
the next slide. Oh, another question?
No, go ahead.
So the other piece to this is informing voters on how to successfully participate in this election, whether that is to be registered. So the voter registration deadline for this election is October 5th. So we already have commercials through our paid media strategy, and commercials on television as well as streaming media. We have commercials over the radio. I heard them coming in, driving in this morning. We have digital billboards that are advertising these the registration deadline, as well as going through social media accounts as well. So that's phase one. That will end right after the voter registration deadline. We will be open here at McTech. We have our drive-through drop box that is accepting voter registration, and that we'll have that manned and staffed until midnight on October 5th, accepting voter registration forms. We also then, the next phase of the campaign, which will start right after October 5th and run for a couple weeks, will really be to talk about security of this election, a lot of the protocols that we're implementing, the security over the mail-in ballot process and our tabulation centers, and how voters can track that early ballot themselves and sign up for that text messaging, and also where to return their early ballot. And then as we near election day and we start opening up for those 2-week vote centers, that's when we'll transition into informing voters that their voting location may have changed from 2016 or 2018. It's really important that voters are aware that there may be a change, and then how to vote and how to return their ballots to us. So those are the 3 phases of our paid media. We'll have ads in both Spanish and English. And then we have a whole variety of different options and avenues that we're communicating with voters. Another is our BeBallotReady.vote website. It's the customized dashboard that voters can use, enter in some of their personal information, their house address, their last name, and either the last 4 of their social, their voter registration ID number, or their state ID number. And then they can get a customized dashboard that tells them if they're registered to vote, if they're not, where they can go get more information on how to register. It links them to service.arizona to be able to sign up and register through that process. It tells them if they are a permanent early voter. It tells them what's on their ballot. They can get a copy of their sample ballot, and also then tells them and links them to the voting locations page so they can find out where our vote centers are. We're creating election toolkits. This will be to inform, some of those will be videos talking about how to mail in ballots and the security over the ballots, to also how we're tabulating and what we'll be doing in our tabulation center. So a whole variety of videos that will be posted on our website, as well as at BeBallotReady.vote. And then we will be sending direct mailers, Mr. Valenzuela described, to non-Pebble voters, letting them know that they do have the opportunity to sign up for an early ballot, whether it be one time or permanently, but also to remind those early ballot recipients of when the mail back dates are, right? And inform them so they do get it back to us on time, or what their options are to return it to us, whether it be at one of our drop box locations or early voting locations. And then we'll also do something similar that we did in August primary, was robocalls for those phone numbers that we do have numbers for those voters. We'll be sending through a robocall with those same types of reminders. We could go to the next slide, please. So with COVID-19, we've partnered with the Maricopa County Public Health Department to identify what are those safety protocols that we need to implement for our voting locations, as well as at our Maricopa County Election Center and Tabulation Center. So those protocols include, so when voters go to an in-person voting location, they're going to see 6 feet of physical distancing. All of our check-in stations, our voting booths will all be 6 feet apart from one another, so voters can vote and be physically distanced. All of our poll workers will be wearing face masks as well as face shields throughout the voting process. They will have gloves. They will be frequently cleaning high-touch surfaces. So that would be any lights, switches, door handles, the voting booths themselves, the check-in stations. But we will also be implementing very similar types of protocols here at the Elections Department to ensure that our staff is safe, and all those central board workers that are coming in. We'll have over 300 temporary staff that will come in to support this election, and many of them working over a month. And we need to keep those staff members safe as well. So we're really appreciative of the guidance that we received from the County Public Health Department and really implementing these safety protocols. We can go to the next slide. So there's been several questions today about our tabulation and reporting, especially the timelines for us to be able to report those late earlies. But there's also some other information that voters need to know about this election. We've introduced brand new tabulation equipment, which is a great thing. Mr. Valenzuela described how much quicker it is than our old equipment that we had purchased in 1996. But along with that equipment comes a brand new ballot style. And we've talked about this through the March presidential preference election. We've talked about this in August, but there's still going to be many voters that this is going to be their first time voting using, in Maricopa County, using ovals rather than arrows. So it is going to be a brand new ballot style. We're confident that it's more intuitive to complete in oval, and it should make the voting process that much easier for voters. I mentioned the new equipment. Not only does it count votes a lot quicker, our old equipment was limited at about 3,000 to 5,000 per machine per hour. Our new equipment can reach up to speeds of 6,000 to 8,000 per machine per hour. But we're also not limited from a memory capacity to only doing it 6 hours a day. So there was questions about if we received over the 300,000 to 400,000 ballots of those late ballots that came in at the very end of the process, what would we need to do? Well, we can always expand our shifts and work later into the evenings to be able to count those ballots and still meet our timelines and our goals. And then the state legislature and the governor's office in the last legislative session recognized that counting these early ballots was a challenge, and they increased the amount of time that we can start. So that's why we are encouraging voters to drop off that ballot to us. If they've already made their decisions, vote that ballot and get it back to us as early in the process, because we can start tabulating 14 days before the election. And then that will, all of those results that we have tabulated before the election, and our goal is everything that has been received by end of day Saturday to be included in those election reporting results at 8 p.m. on the Tuesday before the election. If we can get through and we can get some of those even that come in on Sunday, we'll do that as well. But that is the goal, everything that was at the end of day Saturday. And then after that, we'll be doing nightly returns through that election night. That'll include anything that's coming back from the precincts. Those probably going to be right around 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. There'll be subsequent reports of results. And then we'll have a daily update at 7 p.m. every day to report results. And we have expanded that to be at 7 p.m. because we wanted that much extra time every day to get through those ballots. So that's the goal, is at 7 p.m. to have a daily release of anything that we're uploading and releasing to the public. And then in those releases, they'll be accompanied by a press release that will describe how many ballots we still have left in the process. So voters and the public are informed of exactly where we are and how many more we have to count. And then our goal, so we have a statutory time frame of 5 business days after the election. So that's 5 p.m. on the Tuesday following the election that voters have to be able to cure any their signatures. So if they had a signature and we had a question that it wasn't matching, they have up until that point in time. Same with provisional voters. So our goal is to have everything completed by that cure deadline, which would include any signatures that cured over that process. I know that there's been several questions about the reporting. I know Supervisor Gates, you had mentioned that you had some other questions about this. Were you able to get all your questions answered, or do you have additional?
No, I don't have any more questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, if we can go to the next slide. So as both Ray and I have mentioned, we could not provide an election without a community coming together to support this election. And that includes, number one, is our poll workers, really willing to come and work at our voting locations. It also includes our central board workers. We have an army of volunteers, right, that come and support these elections, staff our polling locations, work incredibly long hours to serve voters. We're incredibly appreciation of these poll workers and central boards. But it's also county departments. We have employees throughout the county coming to help the elections department, anywhere from the county public health department that helped us design our safety protocols, to the Office of Enterprise Technology that helps us set up these locations, to county workers themselves. Some of them are taking 2 weeks of vacation to come and work as a troubleshooter or as a poll worker. So I'm incredibly grateful to those county workers. But we have the cities and towns coming to the table to provide some of them vote centers or drop box locations. We have community groups. We have the political party observers we're working with. We met with them this last week, talking about all of the opportunities that the political parties have to observe voting process, whether it's in our vote centers, where it's here at our tabulation center, or it's during the EV processing, but also at our drop box locations, and monitoring the couriers as they're driving around picking up all of these ballots. There will be political party observers out there monitoring those activities, and we welcome that because it just adds one extra layer of oversight and integrity to the process, knowing that those political parties are involved. But then we also have our new partners, and we're really thrilled by this. The professional sports teams in the Valley have really come to the table to help serve Maricopa County voters. We have the Coyotes providing, and the city of Glendale, the Gila River Arena out in Glendale. So that will be a vote center serving voters as well as allowing voters to drop off their early ballots. We have the Phoenix Suns working with the Veterans Memorial Coliseum and the Arizona State Fairgrounds to be able to provide a voting location at the Veterans Memorial Coliseum, as well as a drive-through drop box. We have the Arizona Cardinals that are going to be part of the spring training facilities, encouraged this activity, and then all the owners, the individual owners, the teams for all the arenas and stadium gates. We are, because it's not actual voting, it's just a drop box location, and because they are driving, there's vehicles involved. We're setting up a safety perimeter, not the 75-foot of our safety perimeter. Make sure.
So we will consider item 23, adopt resolutions for the November general election. Item number 25, appropriation adjustment for grant fund. Item number 26, revocable license agreement with Macerec Partnership LP. And number 27, lease agreement with AINA Holdings. The board will now consider items 23 and 25 through 27.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of items 23, 25, 26, and 27.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Under Facilities Management, number 28, 1280 Detention Facility Naming, Watkins Jail. Under Finance, number 29, non-obligation letter for foreign trade zone for Ball Metal Beverage Container Corporation Incorporated. Number 30, funds transfer warrants. Under Human Resources, number 31, employee discount vendor donation, and 32, market ranges. The board will now consider items 28 through 32.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of items 28 through 32.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Under Human Services, item 33, accept grant funds from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Number 34, submittal of grant application to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. 35 through 37 is to amend the IGAs with Mesa Unified School District, Scottsdale Unified School District, and the City of Tolleson. Number 38 is a developer agreement with Newtown Community Development Corporation. The board will now consider items 33 through 38.
So moved.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Under procurement, ASO Dental Claim Administrator for Employee Self-Insured Group, PPO, 40 On-Site Clinical Medical and Specialty Health Services, number 41 Asphalt, Emulsified Oil and Petroleum Resin, 42 Heavy-Duty Truck, Construction and Agriculture, Industrial Fleet and Equipment Parts, Service and Accessories. The board will now consider items 39 through 42.
Mr. Chair, move approval of items 39 through 42.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Under public health, 43 through 44 amend IGAs with the Arizona Board of Regents and Arizona State Board of Pharmacy. 45 through 46, contracts with neighborhood outreach access to health and with Dignity Healthcare. Number 47, IGA with Arizona Department of Health Services. 48, notice of intent to contract with Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. 49, accept and use of gift cards for the Tuberculosis Control Incentive Program. 50, purchase order for IGA with Arizona Department of Health Services. 51, apply and accept grant funds from Health Service and Resources Administration. The board will now consider items 43 through 51.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of items 43 to 51.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Under transportation, 52, amend policy regarding road bridge condition levels. 53, bill of sale for Queen Creek Domestic Water Improvement District assets. And that's been requested to continue to October 21st, 2020. 54, contract with WSP USA, Inc. 55, quitclaim deed and assignment of easement for El Mirage Road. 56 through 57, annexations by the town of Gilbert. 58, easement, right-of-way, and relocation assistance documents. Under industrial development, 59, resolution of the issuance of bonds for the benefit of Ottawa University. Okay, 53 will be continued, so the board will now consider items 52 and 54 through 59.
Move approval with a brief comment.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 58, this is an important item for us up in the northern part of District 3. I want to thank the Real Estate Department in McDOT for their work on this issue. This will allow for a portion of 20th Street to be paved up there. We've had requests from residents for years on this, and it's going to make a difference in mitigating the dust, which is an issue up there. So I want to thank everyone for their work on this important item.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Second, the motion with one caveat that we are pulling 53 out because I think we will need a separate motion to continue that to the 21st. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Chukri, since it is not a public hearing, it can simply be announced that we're moving it, so we don't need a motion on that.
Perfect. Then I second without my commentary. I apologize.
It's okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Setting of hearings, planning and development. Item number 60, planning and zoning, setting of hearings. And item 61, under transportation, road file number 2948-R. The board will now consider items 60 and 61.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of items 60 and 61.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Under consent agenda, clerk of the board. Item 62, settlement resolutions of property tax cases and claims, 63 through 69, cancellation of election and approval of appointments to the Board of Directors and Board of Trustees. Number 70, 2020 report of active special taxing districts. 71, RICO funds quarterly report. 72, minutes. 73, duplicate warrants. 74, civil penalty appeals for approvals. 75, donations. And please note, Supervisor Gates will recuse himself from item number 62.
So we just want to do number 62 first?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Sorry, I should have read that first.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gates, do you want to step out just for 62 and we can make a motion for the rest?
Yes.
I would make a motion to approve all of these items unless Mr. Gates wants to vote on the remaining ones and not item 62.
Do you feel like voting?
Okay.
So my motion would be to approve all items with the exception of item number 62, and with a thank you for item number 75 to the donations we received.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries. Okay, now the board will consider item 62.
Mr. Chairman, I move approve. Oh, I'll second it.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, if we could get Supervisor Gates back. Okay, under addendum, Board of Supervisors. Number 76, CARES Act expenditure approval. And under elections, we did 77 earlier. And then under elections, 78 through 79, lease agreements with EC Crossroads, the second LLC and Morris Family Trust. And number 80, appropriation adjustment for grant funding from State Arizona Vote Save. The board will now consider items 76 and 78 through 80.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Addendum continued, Parks and Recreation, number 81, settlement and mutual release agreement with Trace Rios Golf LLC. Number 82, assignment of use management agreement with Trace Rios Golf LLC. And number 83, amend use management agreement with Southwest Management LLC. The board will now consider items 81 through 83.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. We will now recess as the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and convene as the Flood Control District Board of Supervisors. Under Flood Control District, we have items 84 through 88, and the board will now consider items 84 through 88.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion also carries. We will now adjourn as the Flood Control Board of Directors and convene as the Library District Board of Directors. Under Library District, the only item is number 89, minutes. The board will now consider item 89.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. We will now adjourn as the Library District Board of Directors and convene as the Stadium Board of Directors. Under the Stadium District, item 90, administrative correction to annual audit. The board will now consider item 90.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Supervisor Chukri, a second from Supervisor Gallardo. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. We will now adjourn as the Stadium Board of Districts, Stadium District Board of Directors, and reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. Item number 91, public comment. Clerk, do you have anything to report regarding public comment email responses?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we've received several public comments, and they break down into two categories. We received 34 questions, comments, or concerns from people about the mask regulation, and we have received 9 comments about animal care and control. They're wondering about the volunteer program and if it will be started up again. Those are the two categories that we had for comments today.
Okay. Item 92, Supervisor Summary of Current Events. Joy, do you have anything this morning?
Mr. Chairman, just a reminder for everyone to get their flu shot either through our employee site or through your own provider. It's really very important.
Thank you. And I said this morning, I think we are now afternoon. Supervisor Chukri.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to respectfully sign off. Not that I don't want to hear what my colleagues have to say, but I am running late. So thank you. Great job chairing. You're hired. And I've already expressed that to Mr. Hickman.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you all.
Okay, Supervisor Gallardo.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman. Just congratulations on chairing. I think this is your first meeting serving as our chair, and we know next year when you're the chair to bring snacks because you have a 5-year or 5-hour meeting. But nonetheless, congratulations. Good job.
Thank you. Supervisor Gates.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree. Great job leading us here through a very important meeting, a lot of important items. Just a couple things I wanted to mention briefly. Had the opportunity, and I know you were there as well, Mr. Sellers, to attend the latest Bridge Forum and a great discussion of social justice and all the issues going on in our community. And it was a particular focus on sports, and we had representatives of the major professional franchises there. So a wonderful discussion. And I've been invited to another one where we will be discussing mental health issues along with our presiding judge, Judge Welty, and others. So these very important issues that are being discussed, and really feel privileged to be a part of those discussions. And then also looking forward to speaking at the East Sunny Slope Neighborhood Association. They'll be having their meeting on September 29th at 7 p.m. And in the interest of the current COVID-19 situation, that will be an outdoors meeting. So it should be lovely, 7 p.m., looking forward to that. I think there's like a presidential debate that evening, but I think it'll be far more interesting to be there with the folks in Sunny Slope and hear what's on their minds that evening. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I believe our county attorney may be attending that Bridge Forum as well. So
That's right.
It should be very interesting. I just very quickly, a couple of comments. I dropped off a CARES check at the Sun Lakes Fire District yesterday, a substantial amount, and received huge appreciation from them. And in fact, they want to come here to the county in a couple of weeks and thank us again for doing that and recognizing the needs of that that district that is in a unincorporated area of the county. So very much appreciated. I'll also mention just quickly that the East Valley Partnership Transportation Committee now has been expanded and called the Critical Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, and that was done so that we could add water resources as one of the items that we talk about and that we look after. And you know, that's recognizing that that really is a very critical part of our future. So I'm very happy to be one of the co-chairs of that committee and happy to see that added. So with that, Fran.
Mr. Chairman, I was reminded by our attorney that I needed to let you all know that the comments that we did receive will be sent to all of your offices, so you'll be able to review them.
Very good. Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions? I move this meeting be adjourned.